Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and this is a bit of a follow-up from a video I put up yesterday. This is pertaining to the kind of the unshuffled sort of effect, which we'll look at here again, and just playing off of a few comments that were made in the discussion there, just to give a bit of a video response to some of those ideas. I could do a presentation, something like this, where you have a deck of cards and explain maybe very familiar sort of pattern here, but explain maybe a time when you were going to do a trick. You're going to do an effect, and you had someone shuffle the cards. And when I ask someone to shuffle the cards, I typically intend for them to shuffle them like this, right? So that you truly just have a shuffled up kind of situation. All the cards are in a random order. One time I asked someone to do this, and what they did is they just dropped all the cards on the floor, and it just made a terrible mess. In fact, it wasn't even really this clean. What it really looked like was as if the cards were picked up in complete disarray. You actually had some cards facing up, some cards facing down, kind of like this, just these clumps of cards every which way. I haven't even started the trick yet, right? And I'm stuck in this situation where I've got this total mess, and trying to figure out, well, how am I going to do a trick with that, right? So this is where I was, and you can imagine my plight, right? What am I going to do about this situation? Well, fortunately, I'm a magician. And I'm able to fix the problem instantly, and I could get the cards back into a workable order. In fact, this is a complete order. I've got ace through king spades, ace through king clubs, ace through king diamonds, ace through king hearts, all the way back in order. So this is just a quick follow-up on the discussion about the unshuffled concept, and this is playing off of some ideas that were mentioned in the comments, and some things that maybe I didn't play out quite fully on the video. The one thing I neglected to do was to talk about Leonard Green with any amount of time, because when you're dealing with unshuffling cards, Leonard Green is kind of a go-to person. I did mention the idea about angle separation, right? Culling cards out by angle, and then I also talked about the Kostya-Kimlet variation on that, which is just using a Hofstadter spread call to call out cards. The concept there being is that you're actually unshuffling a true shuffle, but it's a simple shuffle, a basic shuffle. And that's something that you can do, and I'm doing right here, but rather than do it with a cull or do it with angle separation, we're just using the slop shuffle triumph as a means to facilitate unshuffling a true shuffle. So what I've got here is a deck that's in full order. I've got a key card in the center so I can get an easy break. These are plastic cards, so it's hard to create a bridge on plastic cards. You can crimp them, which we've talked about before, but this is just a double thick key in the middle. And I've separated this black and red so that it makes the slop shuffle a little bit easier to see and to execute. And one thing I did just as a subtlety is I reversed the top three cards so I could set the deck down like this, and you can see a three of spades on the top. When I pick up, I set down at my key the reds on this side, the blacks on this side, and then I'm going to shuffle a black bed down, small bed, and then shuffle the reds into the black with a red bed on the top. And this is a genuine shuffle, and you can see it there. In doing so, what you're doing is you're shuffling, interlacing kind of blockily black into red. So what I can do is drop down the bed, spread shallow, then spread thick, and then spread shallow. And if you just reach down immediately and give a little bit of a contortion to the cards, you actually have a situation that can sit out in the open. You can put your hands over the top of it. You can lean over it. You can just quickly point to the fact that this is what I intended for them to do, was to shuffle the cards like this, but that's not what they did. Now you have a proof. You have a full deck proof that demonstrates a shuffled situation, even though it's a very basic single riffle very blocky riffle shuffle. It's something that I can easily undo using the slop shuffle triumph consequence. Now, I could angle call separation this. I could I could Hofzinser spread call this, road runner call as it's become known. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue with a storyline here, a process and procedure, which we'll talk about process and procedure concepts here in a second related to Patrick Redford, which came up in the discussion there. What I say is what they actually did was they dropped them on the floor. Now I'm giving a false shuffle because I don't want to change this order any more than it is. It's already manageable. If I were to shuffle again, riffle shuffle, or shuffle this in a meaningful way again, it would make it really unworkable for what I'm trying to do. So I've done one simple shuffle that I can undo fairly easily, and I'm going to composite that with a couple of false shuffles. So here I've got just a table spread zipper sort of wash, which we've talked about before, and I bring them together. I say they dropped them on the ground, and it just made a complete mess. In fact, it wasn't even as good as this. And then what I do is I pick up the cards, and how I handle it here is I reverse the top three so that I would have my ace 2 3 back in order. No one can see this. Now what I'm doing is I'm spreading black at my key, which is the first card I'm going to run into, my key card. I'm going to turn over and grab the key in the center. This is going to make my separation at the end of the slop shuffle very simple too, with having that double thick key in there. Could be a short, could do that as well, or bridge if you're using paper cards. I turn over and I continue with my slop shuffle, and I'm just going black and red now. And I'm saying this is really the state it was in. There were some cards facing up, some cards facing down. It was really just a total mess. You had cards facing every which way. And I'm sitting here thinking, how in the world am I going to deal with this situation? Right? And you can do this little turnover maneuver subtlety actually from Kostya Kimlet, dealing with a slop shuffle and culling that he talks about on his Roadrunner call video. But turning over the mess like this is a good convincer, even if you don't have cards facing the wrong way, which is what I usually like to do with like a 4-ace triumph or a 4 of a kind triumph. You'll have the 4 of a kind facing the wrong way in the pack, and this really looks clean, right? Now I'm in a situation where I can break, I can square. I could do my convincers. I'd say some cards are facing up, some cards are facing down, some cards are face to face, and some cards are back to back. I can break now at my key card, dropping the key card to the red packet. I put down the black packet, put the red packet on top, and square up, and now I'm in full deck. I'm in new deck, or actually running order is what it is. One quick thing about new deck order. There is an assumption among magicians that new deck order must be a certain thing, and that's not quite true. Even Bicycle in the USS in the US Playing Card Company, even the Bicycle brand is no longer putting out all of their types of cards with the same new deck order. The plastic prestige cards actually don't follow that order. They're in a different suit order. I think they're actually in suit hierarchy. And I believe they're ace through king rather than ace through king, and then switching, going in reverse. So you really can call this new deck order. There's no reason why you can't call any kind of logical running order the new deck order. That's completely passable. Those that say otherwise are kind of stuck in a tradition of how they find their cards. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. You can say, I'm actually back in new deck order, and then you can spread. And the presence of the key really doesn't matter. This key could be an ace or it could be the king, but it doesn't really matter because you find that in new deck order. You'd find a joker or an advertising card or something like that. It's really irrelevant. But you can now show ace through king, spades, ace through king, clubs, ace through king, diamonds, ace through king, hearts. And that's the effect, and it's got all of the convincers in there. Why would this be useful? Well, someone put posted an article from the Jerks from some time ago about this concept of deck switching versus false shuffles. I think it's entirely overthink. I think it's overthink. I think that he's thinking too hard. I don't think there's such a thing as thinking really too hard, because thinking too hard is going to reveal some interesting ideas that will make your concepts and your methods better for sure. But I don't think people actually think about deck switch and false shuffle. I don't think their minds really go there. Even magicians don't think that way necessarily in the moment. When someone is fooled by something, they don't necessarily jump right on the methods. Now, they might kind of go for the low-hanging fruit, right? The low-hanging fruit for the average spectator is trick deck. You're using a trick deck, right? That's what they'll say, things like that. But I don't think they necessarily arrive logically, quickly, efficiently in the moment at one or the other. And I don't think that any kind of particular presentation will automatically too perfectly point to one or the other. The benefit, though, to the jerk's point, is that if you do something like this, you really muddle up the picture because you have proof. They can't say false shuffle if they see a real shuffle and proof of a real shuffle. Likewise, if the patter is about shuffle, as it is in this case, if the concept is about shuffle, they can't forget the shuffle. It can't pass by, which was another point that was made, right? So in an effect like this, making a point about shuffle, this is one way that you can get away with that because we're talking about shuffling. We're showing proofs of shuffling. And you can't think trick deck, and you can't think deck switch. No one really thinks of that. And you can't think false shuffle either because you saw the thing, right there. So then you're left with the effect, which is the triumph effect with the added benefit that everything is facing the right way. You could have a card selected and do that sort of card selected triumph with this kind of ending, but this is a concept. Now, this is in line with the one avenue that I said probably isn't worth it, and that is to put the deck in order on the fly. This is a very minor variation on that because we are unshuffling, but we're unshuffling a very basic, simple single riffle shuffle, which is much more easy to do as per Leonard Green and Kostya Kimlet. However, we're not really going there, right, where the spectator is shuffling the cards completely and thoroughly and then putting it back in order. To go there, someone mentioned you can go to Patrick Redford's Thought Master, right, and his sorting principle, which I'm not going to talk about, except to say that it is what you think. I mean, he essentially has a sorting procedure that goes with a trick. And the trick doesn't have to use a sorting procedure. The trick is really about sorting, but sorting for the in the effort of determining a thought of card using sorting principles, like binary sorting does when you're trying to find a thought of number on cards of numbers, or the ED seat thing by Craig Petty, which we talked about recently, and those kinds of tricks. It's that sort of premise, right? But you can apply that premise to an actual sorting procedure, which puts a deck into stack. Could you do that to put a deck into new deck or running order? I don't think you can really do his procedure to do that without having some major problems with what you see on the table. His procedure is really best equipped for a shuffled looking stack, because as you're doing some sorting, things are going to be seen face up, and it really would look like you're just putting all of these like things here and these like things here and then putting these like things in order. It is what it is. It's sorting the deck, into an order, but it has motivation in it. So that would be a problem. In fact, when he says you can do this with any memorized deck, you can't do it with mine. My memorized deck is actually a 10-card cyclical stack. And if you do his procedure face up, there's actually going to be problems with the sorting as you do it, because it'll stand out in the methodology that is using in the counting, base 10 counting. So it won't work for every stack. However, if you had marked cards or something like that, you maybe be able to do it. This is theoretical. I don't know that would be very pragmatic, because you'd have to decipher. You'd be doing a lot of things at one time. You'd be deciphering groups. You'd be deciphering placement, and you would also you'd be dealing with the markings themselves. Even if they were readers, reading a good reader isn't really the same as reading the face of a card. It's not exactly as immediate, right? That kind of recognition. So now, on that point, can you come up with any other kind of sorting method to sort a shuffled deck into new deck order? Yeah, you just have to, all you need is to develop justification for your procedure, whatever procedure it is you're doing. within a couple of sorts. Maybe Patrick's is just a couple of sorts with a little bit of preemptive setup where you have to get a few things kind of in order right out at the onset, which is motivated in his trick, his presentation. It's really just a couple of sorts. You get where you need to be. You probably need 3 or 4 kinds of different sorting procedures, which if they're not covert and they'd have to be in the open, you'd have to find a way to do it so they can't see like groups going together, and I think that would be very difficult. So this is something in between, right? This is something in between where we're depending on a lot of different methods all kind of mixed together in a composite to get to the end. So recap, what does this look like? Well, we're doing a real culling procedure, but we're doing it openly with a slop shuffle. So we're culling a true shuffle. We're doing a true shuffle with a proof. Okay, so we're culling off of a true shuffle with a proof with additional false shuffling on top of it. And the whole thing is motivated by an additional effect, triumph, right? We're motivated by the procedure is motivated by story in order to allow us to do the procedure. So we kind of hit all the bases there with something like that. Now, some of you will look at this and say, shuffling, just to kind of play this up, that shuffling black into red in order does not look shuffled enough. I disagree. I think it's perfectly shuffled enough, especially if you reason that you're going to end up kind of in the central location is what you're going to show most, which should have the overlap of all 4 suits, or at least 3 of 4 suits at one point. And if you do a shallow spread, right, shallow on the ends and then thicker in the middle, they're looking at red-black. Another nuanced point, and I did this on purpose just to make this point here, these are jumbo cards. So what? They're jumbo cards. Well, on jumbo cards, when you do a shallow spread, it's hard to see exactly what all of the values are because you only see part of the index, right? And if you can only see part of the index, shuffled, what looks shuffled looks more shuffled because you don't see, your eyes can't really pick out numerical pattern. I don't think you would see it anyway, even if there were regular ones, but this is something to consider, is that if you're doing a shallow spread to demonstrate shuffle in a very casual way, jumbo indices are perfect for that because you don't really see pattern anyway. You don't really see sequence. So here I have it. If I stared at this for a while, and I mean a long while, I could see it. But I argue that even a magician in this presentation, not knowing the end from the beginning, would not see what's going on here. They wouldn't know. I think they would get to a point where you're doing the slop shuffle and they would say, I know what that is and I know where this is going. But I would bet that if you got to the end and you show that everything is actually in new deck running order, I think that would be a shock to some magicians because that proof is sufficient, I think, right? No magician looks at a spread and thinks, okay, now's the point where I analyze if there is a stack. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. You have to go into the situation wanting to do that, right? And no one really does that. What a person, any spectator, magician or not, is doing in a presentation is they're hearing the instructions, they're seeing the motion, and they're trying to catch on to what is the point. And that takes mental process. It takes mental procedure. It takes some thinking. It takes some listening, and it takes interpretation. And with all of what it takes to follow what's going on, there's not enough room really for good analysis that would kind of go off into this fringe area of stacked decks. Okay, especially after seeing a genuine shuffle. So I argue that a shuffle black and red in contrary numerical value is good enough for a casual show and proof. And then from there, you just have to unshuffle a pretty simple shuffle, and slop shuffle triumph is a good way to do it in the open where there's no sleights. This is really slightless. There's no sleights at all involved in this presentation, yet the outcome is pretty powerful. So anyway, just one more idea, a few more ideas, and also response to some suggestions that were put up there in the conversation. Do I recommend Patrick Redford's Thoughtmaster? I do. I'm not a review channel, but I do recommend it. There's actually a bunch of nuanced things that he talks about. One of the reasons why I think that long form videos are better than the short, few minute ones, is because you will probably get, if you're listening and if you're patient and you're paying attention, you'll probably get a lot more ideas out of the tangential discussion than you will about the core subject. And here we're talking about unshuffled as an effect. But there's other things we're talking about. In Redford's videos, he has a lot of tangential stuff that you may use even if you don't use the effect. And there's a lot of stuff he talks about on there, just about procedure and psychology and the way, particularly geography on the table and the way you do things. He makes a lot of good observational points that he's learned over the years. Highly recommend it. It's pretty inexpensive. Even if you don't do stacked work, the trick alone is actually quite good. Very good trick that you don't have to do with a stack. Solid thought of card kind of magic using an age-old principle. Highly recommend it. So anyway, those are some more thoughts on some of the things that you brought up and a little bit more of an extended conversation on the subject. And that's all I got for you today. So good luck with that. Happy magicking.